Hello on the Rockers. Halloween season continues with our horror queer chat with screenwriter, director, producer, podcaster, columnist Michael Varrati, and my guest co-host, multimedia artist, and horror film devotee, Sumner Mormeneo. And me, your sassy host with the sassy most. Raise a glass, let the drinks begin. We're bringing the spirits to spirits on the Rocks.
Thank you for being
Boulevard.
Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death.
I'd like to propose a toast.
This is On the Rocks with Alexander, where I drink with your favorite celebrities as we talk about fashion, entertainment, pop culture, reality TV, and, well, that's about it. So pop a cork, lean back, and raise a glass to On the Rocks.
Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Buttons and bows and pantyhose on the Rocks podcast, a place where we're too glam to give a damn. Send us your thoughts and prayers tonight. Actually, keep your prayers, just send us the thoughts. And you know, it's THOTS. On the Rocks on the road, yes, indeed. We did finish our 10th City in 2 months summer tour without at the fair, but we are coming to Palm Springs for Halloween Palm Springs, the arena's roadblock party with thousands of partygoers. Headliner, Grammy award-winning Motown legend Thelma Houston. I'll be your MC for the night. It's 6 hours long. Go to HalloweenPalmSprings.com for your tickets and info, and get your VIP tickets because you get to hang out with me backstage, all of the celebs, open bar, all the go-go boys. Girl, hope I make it to Pride. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at On The Rocks On Air, and on Facebook On The Rocks Radio Show. Send me an email, book me for a wedding, funeral, quinceañera, bris, I don't care, I'll show up. Info at ontherocksradioshow.com. Send us your comments, your guest requests, and your guest questions. We have some guest questions from you for tonight. The show's presented by Strawhead Media. You can watch and or listen to our now over 383 episodes for free. You can watch us on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, on the Outlet.tv app, Facebook Watch, on GED Magazine, and I Love Gay LGBTQ, streaming with Pride on SVTV and on Channel 31 on the East Coast. We proudly tape at UB and Go Studios, your one-stop place for podcasting. Let's get the show on the road. Making his debut on the Rocks, and our designated driver tonight, Sumner Mormeneo is a multimedia artist from Orlando. His paintings and performance work are greatly influenced by surrealism and the macabre visual language of German Expressionism. And in the city of Orlando, he has been nominated for numerous arts awards, including a Golden Brick Award, Best Local Visual Artist by the Orlando Weekly, every year from 2017 to 2021. And his show, The Infinite Conversation, won him the award for Best Technical Achievement at the 2021 Orlando Fringe Festival for pushing the boundaries of what theater and performance art could be. And as of 2022, we got him. He now lives in Los Angeles, causing mischief in LA nightlife. Please welcome Sumner Mormeneo. I had no idea, like you know, I know you from like tooling around West Hollywood, but I didn't realize like you have this whole. And when we say performance art, it's not like, oh, you know, I sing on the street and I do a few like finger puppets, like this immersive show that you had. Mm-hmm. And it's because you look at you and you don't assume there's this like deep dark side to you. Where did that deep dark side come from?
My childhood. I call it performance art just because I come from such an arts background. I think as my art evolved and the performance evolved, it just naturally went into a theater landscape, and so just by default, I always thought of it as performance art still. So.
And you've done murals all over, a lot of painting work, but you made this like very dramatic post during your drive from Orlando to Los Angeles, and it seemed like your art kind of had a huge shift.
Yes.
At that point. Can you talk about that shift and
Yeah.
what medium are you most obsessed with right now?
So in December, I'll be 4 years sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's why you're driving tonight, and not me.
Gladly. And that year, I took care of mental health stuff, went to therapy, and I feel like I really, where before I got sober, I wasn't necessarily able to articulate what was going on in my head. And so that's where art, performance, painting, all that came into play. Because getting to express myself maybe in a surreal or abstract setting was just easier to convey what was going on. And then after getting healthy, I have words, and I think rather than doing abstract ideas in art, I'd rather be telling stories now. So since I moved here, I had the realization like, well, I've been writing performances. I like performances, but I like writing them. And then I realized all I ever really want to do is write scary movies. And that's subconsciously why I moved here.
All right, by the end of the show tonight, you and Michael are going to agree to kill me in a movie. That's been my lifelong dream since I was a little boy. Is I've always wanted to be killed in a movie. How dare you? How dare you? But your paintbrushes are just like sitting there crying because you're like ignoring them.
They are. They really are. And I'll have people ask me like, when are you going to paint, perform here? And I'm like, honestly, I have no idea. I've been at it writing for 2 years now on the second draft of something, and it's the most exciting thing I've done in a long time.
And it's horror-based.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Now, how's it been moving to LA, which is very different from Florida, but then working on your writing? Did you find it that it's easier? Was it harder to kind of adjust and focus on your work?
Yeah, definitely the first year was rough, just because of culture shock. I think there's like a lot more people. And when I got here, job fell through and blah, blah, blah. So like half a year, it was rough. So trying to force myself to be creative and get in the mindset and what work to focus on when I still needed to, be financially stable too. It was rough. But the idea that I had for the screenplay came to me on the U-Haul drive. So as soon as I got here, I went at it, and it's really what kept me going that first year. And after a year, I'm coming up on 2 years now. It's been almost like a saving grace kind of thing, because in Orlando, I guess I would get opportunities and praise, and I would share my work, where this is, something I'm silently doing by myself upstairs when my dog's licking my feet. And
Yeah.
It's a little weird not sharing my work,
And getting that energy.
Yeah. And the performance too, and hyping up performances. It's been weird, like not having that in my life anymore, but it feels right.
Well, I can't wait to read my part and how I die. I mean, I'm very excited.
I'm going to work it in. I'm very excited to write that now.
Now, we kind of sparked each other's interest over our talk of horror films, because you literally know so many films. And when people say, I love horror films, especially during Halloween, you're like, yeah, okay, there's more than, I know what you did last summer. There's like actual horror films.
Mm-hmm.
You knew every kind of obscure horror film. Mm-hmm. What were the first kind of horror films that got you interested in the genre?
Ooh, okay. So I was just thinking about this a few weeks ago, because for the longest time, I used to say when I was little, I hated horror. And it scared... Can we curse on here?
Yeah, it's just $10 per curse word.
Scared the
I
shit
got
out
you.
of me.
Okay, all right.
And my parents had no regard. They didn't care. I remember being forced to go see Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, and that's not even that bad. But I remember crying on the way
Wait, it's
to
not
the
that bad? You mean it's not that scary?
Not that scary.
Don't say it's not that bad, because...
Not that scary.
Sorry, Tim.
I remember like cowering in the theater watching the Texas Chainsaw remake.
Oh my God, how old were you?
I was like, I'm young.
No, I know you are.
33. I must have been like 13.
To
12?
see Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah.
No.
No, it's
That's
bad.
too young.
Oh, okay. Yeah, tell my mom.
But you love these films now.
Yeah. So when I realized, thinking about this the other day, a few weeks ago, I realized when I was very young, I did not hate horror. I loved like the original Frankenstein. We had all the classic black and whites in our movie VHS
Universal
collection.
Monsters. Yep.
I remember in my rotation, every time we went to Blockbuster, it was Hocus Pocus or Beetlejuice. So it was always something that I gravitated towards. I guess it just took some sort of switch where it went from being innocent to punk rock and let's make it actually scary.
Yeah, well, that's the difference between it being artistically creative and visual to gore. I mean, Texas Chainsaw is all about the gore. So that's a huge... Okay. Well, we're going to talk all about horror films and queer genres and all of that with our guest for today, Michael Varrati, American filmmaker, screenwriter, columnist, and actor known primarily for his work within the horror genre and the world of TV and movies. Outside of his film work, he writes and speaks about pop culture and the horror genre as it relates to the LGBTQ experience, including San Diego Comic-Con. He's written for the Huffington Post, Vice, and the list goes on and on. He was the host of his popular queer horror discussion podcast, Dead for Filth. He has served as a writer-director of the series The Boulet Brothers' Dragula Dragula, and currently partners up with cult leader Peaches Christ for movie screenings and their podcast, Midnight Mass. He's writing and directing for the upcoming Fangoria Awards. He also has a foot in the Christmas movie film market. How does that happen? We're going to talk about it. Please welcome Michael Varrati.
Hi. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for teeing that up. I think Christmas and Halloween have a lot in common.
Let's just get right to it then. How?
Well, you decorate for both.
Some of us use some of the same decorations.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, winter is a time of death.
And they say that the veil, like if you're into paranormal and all that,
Yeah.
the veil is the thinnest during this month.
And in fairness, the winter solstice around the world, if you look at folklore, there are more monsters associated with the Christmas time than even autumn and Halloween. I mean, if you travel into parts of Eastern Europe, you've got devils and trolls and flesh-eating cats.
Krampus?
Yeah, Krampus. I mean, my boy. So, yeah, there's quite a bit there. I think that there's some crossover, but I think there's also crossover between the worlds of the movies. People seem to be very surprised that I do horror movies and Christmas movies, but in their way, they're each cult films because you have dedicated audiences who watch these movies with certain expectations. There are rules to each of the films. Just like Randy gives the rules in Scream, every mom in the Midwest knows the rules of a Hallmark Christmas movie.
Of course.
Yeah, so there's a lot there.
And there is comfort in rewatching the horror films that we love that don't scare us anymore to a certain level. We're still intrigued by that fear, and we
Yeah.
go back to them like Christmas movies.
Absolutely.
Why do we pull out It's a Wonderful Life every year? Why do we watch Nightmare Before Christmas every year? We just have these comfort levels with these films.
Yeah, they become part of our traditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, the audiences are very cultish with each. Like there's conventions now for even the Christmas movies, and the way that they'll sound off on social media. It's like, calm down.
No, I mean, if you're a horror fan, you're familiar with Fangoria and Bloody Disgusting and Dread Central and all these dedicated sites for the horror genre. Well, the Christmas movie genre has those too. And whenever I work on a holiday film, it's like a machine. They follow all the news. They're like, we spotted Melissa Joan Hart in Connecticut. She must be shooting a Christmas movie. So it is interesting to live in both worlds because I see a lot of commonality, even if the movies don't seem that similar. And it has been my experience, because I do a lot of conventions for work, where I might be at my table at Comic-Con or a horror convention, and a punk kid comes up because he wants his horror Blu-ray signed, but then his girlfriend, spouse, mom, whoever is with them, and she's like, I liked Christmas Reunion. And so there in one house are two different viewers for my work.
Yeah. I absolutely love it. We had Ryan Pavey and Brendan Elliott on the show, and Brendan we got a little tipsy, so he drunk dialed Chabert. What's her first name?
Lacey Chabert.
Lacey Chabert. Queen, right?
Yeah.
She's the queen of Christmas movies. But we were at our time, and she was asleep in New York waiting to go on set early the next morning. She was not a happy camper.
Yeah. I won't be
Take me
calling
off the
Lacey
speaker
Chabert.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we love you.
Yes.
And you've written Christmas movies for like Chevy Chase, Morgan Fairchild, Denise Richards, by the
Yes,
way. Yeah. I mean, that just has to be so weird that that's a whole other part of your resume.
It is and it's not. I think I'm very grateful for all of the work that I've done. And every project I approach, it's just, can I find the story I want to tell? And luckily with each of those movies, whether they came to me or I took them to the production houses that made them, I found a story that I was excited by. And of course, when Denise Richards wants to be in a movie that you wrote, that makes it exciting.
Now, does your creative process differ when you're sitting down to write a horror film than when you're sitting down to write a Christmas? Like, do you put yourself in the mode and like light candles and have spooky music playing, and then Christmas music and gingerbread cookies for the other process, or do you just sit down and just start writing and scribbling and?
Well, I think it usually surprises people to learn when asked this question. I say that the process is not all that different because I think that a big mistake when you set out to write in a specific genre is to lean too much on the genre. I think so often movies are written kind of incestuously. Like, I love Friday the 13th, so I'm going to put all of these nods in to Friday the 13th into my horror movie. So then when people go see your movie set at a camp with a slasher, it's like, oh, we've seen this.
Yeah.
And what happens is people lean too much on their likes and don't really think about what they're setting out to do and what makes it unique. And so when I sit down to write a script, I think about the people who live in that world, and that to me is first and foremost the most important. Because when you get up in the morning, you don't know what kind of movie you're going to be in that day. You may make it to grandma's house and have a nice Christmas, or your car may break down and you need to use the phone at the castle that you passed a few miles back. But your day can start exactly the same. So I think about who the people are and what their response to the scenario I put them in would be, and that's where the movies come from.
Okay. All right. Now, do you sit at just a computer, or are you scribbling on like a notepad or?
I usually write primarily on my computer. I do have notepads that I write things on. I've not been ever someone who writes longhand very much because I just grew up with the technology. So.
Okay. All right. Now, do you, as a writer, and this always fascinates me, there's some writers that are so strict that they say when they wake up, the first 4 hours of their day have to be writing. Is that you, or just when it hits you, it hits you?
Well, it depends on a deadline. If there's a deadline, I force myself to sit down and do that because I have to. But otherwise, I think I have to come to it organically throughout the day. Sometimes I'll get up with an idea and I start writing then. Sometimes it takes later into the night. Sometimes I don't start writing until 10 at night and then write till 4 in the morning. But there are writers who do need that structure. I mean, it's what makes Stephen King so powerful is he gets up and he writes for 12 hours a day, rain or shine. And that's why there's 80 best-selling Stephen King novels. And we're all chasing after, him.
I have an idea. Once he's passed, we're still going to have a novel every single year because he's got vaults and vaults and vaults of stuff. Now, how about you getting back into the screenwriting? Do you set a certain time aside? Because I know you're very responsible.
I try to, but I'm a little bit the same. Even with painting and previous work, it would be I have to come to it organically. I would have to be in a mindset or a mood. Especially can't come to it tired because then I force myself and that's just shit work. So. And
sometimes we're just not in the mood. We're just not creative people all the time. Sometimes our brain and our fantasy needs a little rest. Now I have to know, you're so nice and sweet and you're innocent looking. And how does someone like you, born in New Mexico, and you were kind of like a nomad all around the place, how does a sweet boy like you get into horror?
Well, not right away. I mean, much like you, I was afraid of it for a while. I always say that early on, I was a classic textbook scaredy cat. My parents loved to tell the story, considering everything that I do now, that when I was younger, if the music would even get a little tense on the TV, I would run over and turn it off. They were saints because they had to deal with me freaking out, no matter what they were watching. Nope, click. And so for a long time in my youth, I really avoided it. And then there was the fateful day when I was looking through the TV guide and a show called USA Up All Night, which used to air on Friday and Saturday nights in the late 80s into the early 90s, was hosting a double feature of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and Return of the Killer Tomatoes. And
what a bill.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, cinema. And I was obsessed with those titles. For whatever it was, it leapt off the page and I was like, I have to see it. And so I was like, Mom, let me watch this, please. And she, kind of already aware of the fact that I was the kid who ran over and turned off the TV, was like, all right, I'll let you watch it, but I'm going to stay up and watch it with you. She made a big bowl of popcorn. We make it 15 minutes into the movie. She falls asleep. And then I ended up watching both of them. And then how it used to work is the host would sign off and then they would just play them again.
Yeah.
And I sat through and watched them again. And I always sort of refer to that as the baptism of into cult. That was the moment where the kind of tables shifted. And I always acknowledge that, yes, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is horror comedy, not straight horror. And so the Killer Tomatoes was sort of a nice way to kind of ease in. But what it did do is it fundamentally rewired how I perceived these movies, because I was fascinated by the fact that it was so different. It was not the kind of movie that my friends were talking about at school. It was not the kind of movie that they were playing at the multiplex. It was something other, something strange, and something that felt like in that moment that only existed for me. And I became obsessed with that. That was sort of like my drug, the idea that there were these movies that were forbidden and I want them. And for whatever reason, that want overrode the fear. And I started looking for more. What are the movies that they don't want me to know about? What are the movies they don't want me to see? And that leads to Evil Dead. It leads to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It leads to Freddy and Jason and Night of the Creeps and everything forward. And at some point, I was well into it and I realized, oh, this doesn't bother me anymore because I'm kind of addicted to it.
Well, and that idea, Killer Tomatoes, a little bit of camp and, like you said, comedy
Yeah.
in your work, whether you're writing about gay aliens, Count Dracula and theater groups,
Yes.
or, demon nuns, there's an element of comedy to what you do. And we know your work with Peaches Christ, you celebrate camp. Why is it so important to keep those horror elements those comedy elements in horror?
Well, comedy and horror are in many ways two sides of the same coin.
Explain.
Well, essentially, it's all about controlling your audience's reaction. This filmmaker and artist that I know, Daniel Montgomery, put it the best when he said it's about controlling your audience's breathing. Because you essentially lead them to a moment where they're either going to scream or they're going to laugh. And when you think about it, a lot of the setups of a comedy movie, if it goes just slightly in a different direction, it's horror. And a lot of things, because of how absurd a lot of these horror movies are, it could become hysterical. And that's sort of something that I think we all have to be aware of, because if you're doing a gore gag and your aim is to shock, you don't want to make it too over the top because you're going to make your audience laugh. But sometimes that's exactly what you want. And I think that they are kin, whether people realize it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, sometimes we get so scared we uncomfortably laugh.
Yeah.
Or like you're at Halloween Horror Nights every single day of the week. When there's like a jump scare, you laugh. Like especially when you're with your friends. I remember watching the House of Wax remake, and we're all waiting for Paris Hilton to get it, right? And she finally got it, and the whole theater erupted in laughter, whatever. But it was still a scary moment. And I thought she did a good job.
Yes, she really did. Yeah.
But that's, that really mixed the genre together, whether it was a good film or not. But you started writing very early. You would write like one-page stories for your parents. What kind of stuff were you writing at that young age?
Usually it was some sort of comic book or character-related story. It would be like, the Joker has taken over the Super Bowl and Batman has to save them, or some holiday-oriented thing. It's Christmas, so this has happened. I always would write these like one-page thematic stories that would be like, it's holiday, here, this is for you. So that might have set the mold pretty early on the holiday writing. And they were very nice about it. I'm sure those stories were terrible, but they encouraged me in the way that parents do and should. And there is something addictive about creating something and getting feedback from an audience. And as you kind of grow into your interest as an artist, you keep wanting that. There's a dragon that we always chase, I think, as creatives. No matter how much of this you do, no matter how many TVs your show plays on, or where, what venue your show opens at, you always want that feedback and you want that response, and that starts early, I think.
Did you come to Christmas movies just on your own?
No, actually, it's one of those things where horror brought me to Christmas. And it sounds like something that doesn't make sense, but I had written a couple of essentially no-budget horror movies for a filmmaker on the East Coast who was very into the micro-budget scene. And a couple of them did very well. And when I moved to LA, I met a producer of holiday films, and they had a situation where they had a need for 5 Christmas movies and only had 4, and it was August. And he was like, I need somebody who can write a movie quickly and to budget. Yep. And indie horror filmmakers have to do that all the time. So he reached out and was like, hey, I know you can write, but would you write this? And pitched the idea of me doing a holiday film. And until that moment, I had never really thought about it, but I loved the challenge. And I said yes. And that phone call fundamentally changed my life, because I got to engage with a whole new audience. I realized I love these movies. I do earnestly love these movies. And I really think that it just took me to places that I couldn't have ever possibly thought, so.
Now, growing up, going from city to city, we have such a hard time growing up, coming into our own, regardless of the whole queer aspect. When did the queer aspect start to form, and did it change the type of entertainment that you were engaging with in your youth?
I probably didn't directly realize it right away, but a connection to horror was the queer awakening. I think when you talk about being drawn to movies that have a sense of the forbidden, the sense of otherness, before I even had words for queerness, I knew that that spoke to me because in some way that was me. And as I became more and more interested in these films that I felt spoke for me in ways that the movies that spoke for my friends didn't, there became a greater understanding that this is not just what the public generally thinks of when they think of horror, like the idea that it's just like gore for gore's sake or it's sensationalism for sensational's sake. But there is a power to how the genre works, because horror uses a mechanism of heightened reality to critique, to lampoon, to take on issues that the mainstream maybe was not ready for. And when I was a teenager, out queerness was not something the world was ready for.
Right.
It was something I wasn't ready for because the world told me I wasn't ready for it. And so I kind of locked that away, and I didn't even deal with it until later. But I think by engaging with the movies that I did, it allowed me to understand there was a place and there was a people for me. And it wasn't necessarily monsters or the spooky craziness, although I do love all of that, but just that there is a drum that beats for you.
1% even look at, the Frankenstein movie, where we look at Frankenstein's monster, misunderstood, moments of gentility. The whole village wants to, burn him for who he is. It's like, give the guy a chance, He's...
Well, all of the Universal monsters are queer.
Well, Dracula, hello.
Yeah, I mean, rising in the top of the day in a tuxedo, sure. But I mean, when you look at it, the Frankenstein monster is misunderstood. Mm-hmm. He is literally made for a world that does not want him. The Bride of Frankenstein is made for a relationship that she rejects. The Wolfman has something that he's keeping inside that he considers to be a curse. The creature from the Black Lagoon is living its life when people come in and try and tell it how to be. These are all queer stories. Yeah. And so I think early on, our horror spoke to the queer experience, even if the mainstream audience didn't see it. Queer people did.
100%. Yeah. And queer sensibility has always been part of it. And even like the 70s and 80s slasher films, young guys would go see it because every horror film had, women running around topless. Meanwhile, there's a faction of us that were like, God damn, Johnny Depp in a crop top in Nightmare. I mean, come on.
Yes, yeah.
Now, you talk often on LGBTQ and horror panels. What is it that the queer community is so obsessed with now with horror culture the way it is? What do they want to talk about the most?
Well, I think that they just want to finally speak to the truth that we've known was there all along. For every conversation I have that talks about the universal monsters having always been queer, that horror has been queer since before cinema. If you look at Gothic literature, if you look at Bram Stoker writing love letters to Walt Whitman as he's writing Dracula, these things have always been there, but the way the world operated was the gatekeepers didn't want us to talk about it, or they just didn't know it existed. There were well-intentioned people who might have been on our side, but the history didn't support it because the history wasn't written by us. But we quietly kept it, and we kept track. And now we're seeing the work of so many people bringing this history to light, bringing these stories to light, and also pointing to things that we have always sort of embraced as a community and said, hey, this is queer. It's always been queer. It's not just A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. It's all of these things. Yeah. And we've been here all along. And I think that what is really happening now is that once the floodgates have sort of opened, we have just kind of made the decision we're not going back. And I always say it's not so much about how far we've come, it's about how far we need to go. Even though there have been huge leaps and strides in the last decade, in terms of visibility and representation, there are a lot of letters in the LGBTQIA acronym, and there are so many people who have yet to see themselves on screen. And until we get that representation across the board, we still have work to do.
Well, and then we have like Blumhouse, which is really doing an excellent job in really promoting our queer community. Then we have a film like Freaky, and I know some people thought different things. We had Misha Osherovich on the show.
Love Misha.
And then we talk about which is the conversion
They,
one?
them.
Oh, they/them.
Yes,
Yeah.
They, them. and we had Darwin on the show. Very different experiences filming, but that wasn't considered a successful horror film.
Right.
Do we still need to go support these films? What should we be challenging these films to be different? Because they had consultants from GLAAD for these films. GLAAD continues to play an important part in any type of filmmaking, talking about our stories. So why weren't they successes?
I think that we have to reframe how we think about these things. I think so often, because we weren't represented or didn't have the visibility we wanted for so long, that anytime something comes out, we put this monumental pressure on every release. And it's then kind of this thing where if that release doesn't do well, that's it. We're never going to get another one. And that fear is valid. That is a very valid fear. But I think we're never going to reach true parity until we understand that we're allowed to have queer movies that fail. We're allowed to have queer movies that aren't good. We're allowed to have queer movies that maybe don't necessarily represent us in the best light, but are good stories. And I think that instead of making every movie the sole flagship mission to represent every letter under the LGBTQIA acronym, just make a story that you believe in and that you as an artist can stand behind, and the audience will find it. And especially when you look at horror, that's been the journey of horror all along. Horror is the only genre that if it comes out today and doesn't do well, in 10 weeks it may.
Yeah.
In 20 years it may.
It'll be a cult classic.
In 30 years it may.
Yep.
That's the gift of this genre, is people are looking for the hidden gems. They're looking for the cult appeal. They're looking to find the things that maybe were unheralded and unsung, because we as horror fans are often unheralded and unsung. And so we go looking for those things. If a drama comes out and falls flat, good luck.
Yeah.
Because there aren't Kramer versus Kramer conventions, but there are horror conventions.
That is very true. Joker 2. What? How did the Babadook become this gay icon? How the hell did that happen? They didn't even market it that way.
Well, the Babadook became a gay icon because it dressed like Diane Keaton. End of story.
It was on Netflix.
Yeah.
They accidentally put it in the LGBTQ category.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a miscategooration.
That is so
Yeah,
And
funny.
the gays ran with it.
We didn't even give it a minute.
No, we love a meme, right?
Yeah. I mean, and come on, he looks like a
He
dandy.
does.
He looks like a dandy after an all-nighter.
Yeah, that
Just came home
outfit,
from the afters. Yep.
fierce.
Yeah. It's celebrating its 10th year anniversary. And the filmmaker behind it, they asked her if she wants to do another, and she's like, no, it's good.
No, but she very smartly and kindly, when that meme broke out, when Shout Factory decided to release a new edition of the Babadook for Pride with the rainbow packaging, Jennifer Kent, the writer and director of the Babadook, was like, go for it. And that just makes me love her forever. So
Love it. All right, let's get back to you a little bit. You studied camera acting in school in
Yes.
Ohio. How did that morph into getting behind the camera in the horror industry?
Well, I do think that if you are going to direct, not all directors will agree with me, it's good to have a knowledge of what actors are experiencing in front of the camera.
100%.
I do enjoy acting. I certainly have done my fair share of weird roles in no-budget horror movies. And, if someone is looking, I'm always kind of willing to come out of acting retirement. But I had just really enjoyed the experience of learning the mechanics of being on a set on both sides of it. Mm-hmm. I always knew I wanted to write. Storytelling was always the plan. That's kind of always the main through line. But actors are storytellers. Directors are storytellers. Editors are storytellers. And in a landscape that's so collaborative, the best way to make a movie is to understand how all the different artists work. And so when I took the acting for the camera courses at Kent State University, partially it was for the hammy reason of I want to be on camera. But I did 2 courses on it. The first one was I want to be on camera, but that teacher, Ron Thomas, whose class I really, really enjoyed, when he offered a second version of it, I was like, I got to go back because there's things that I don't know yet that I want to know, because theater acting and camera acting, very different. There are different ways to sell a scene with just a look, et cetera, et cetera. And I just was fascinated by his process, and I would like to think I learned a lot from him. If he's still out there hearing me bandy his name around 20 years later, he's probably like, shut up. But I am very
What a
grateful
successful
for those
student, though. Look what you've gone on to do.
Well, thank you.
Okay, now let's just get to some reality, though. We know independent horror films are not known, like you said, for high budgets, not a lot of A-listers.
Sure.
Could be smaller distribution, smaller fan base. And you thinking, well, I want this to be my career in that genre, knowing that it might not be the most lucrative in terms of other kind of movies. It's like, I want to be a doctor, but I'm going to be a podiatrist. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
You must have really felt passionately to jump in it with all feet. And you have said yes during your career. Short films, directing films, writing films, producing for TV, the holiday movies. You've just continued to say yes. So this passion must have been pretty big for you to be like, well, I'm probably not going to become a millionaire in my first few years of making horror films.
I mean, will I become a millionaire ever? That's the question. But I think that when you do this and you do it from a place of love, you can't not do it. I mean, if I was a podiatrist, but I had that in my heart, I would go home and, shoot a movie on my iPhone because I can't help myself. And that's really something I've learned about myself. Every time I think that the challenges are too insurmountable or the stresses are too much, and I make the declaration to myself, I'm done with this. 2 days later, I'm sitting with my team, and I'm like, okay, but what if we went out into the woods and Bigfoot was a nun, or whatever. I've never pitched that, but maybe I did right now.
You better trademark that right now.
But that's it. I can't help myself. I think that creativity is as much an addiction as anything else. Yeah.
Okay. Dreams was your first kind of big project that was
Yes.
brought to camera from something that you wrote. It was part of an Edgar Allan Poe anthology. Mm-hmm. That being your first kind of big, that's my stuff on screen. What did working on that project teach you most about the future of the industry that kind of maybe shocked you or was new for you?
Well, first off, you have done your research, so thank you very much. Dreams was a fool's errand, really, when you think about how that movie came together, because Bart Mastronardi, who put together the Tales of Poe project with his collaborative partner Alan Rowe Kelly, they wanted to do an anthology of modern-day Edgar Allan Poe stories. And I had worked with Bart on a film that was shot in Western Pennsylvania, and while we were on set, he brought up to me that they were looking for the third story. And he said, but I would like something a little more abstract. And I was like, I have an idea. And Dreams is set in a dreamscape, and it's an entirely silent picture. And that's crazy. It's that thing where you don't know what you don't know, and I think that's why it worked. If I had to do that now, knowing everything I know about the process of filmmaking and the process of screenwriting and the challenges of trying to do something like that with no money, I would have been like, there's no way we can do this. But I didn't know to say that we couldn't do it. So I wrote the most ambitious script that I could because I wanted to tell the best story that I could. And I gave it to Bart, and Bart was like, all right, let's figure it out. And from that, we got this wild, weird fever dream of a segment that ended up starring people I grew up watching. Adrienne King from the original Friday the 13th, Amy Steele from Friday the 13th 2, Caroline Williams from Texas Chainsaw 2. They populate the world of dreams, and what a gift for a horror fan to get to have that as their first sort of big screen credit. And the lesson I learned from that was it was unconventional and it shouldn't have worked. And then my whole career in many ways has been kind of defined by it in the way that when someone tells me, well, it shouldn't work, that doesn't mean that it couldn't work. And I always take that lesson with me into projects I do, for better or worse. Sometimes that blows up in my face, but I've stayed the course because I learned that you just gotta commit to the vision.
Another project you worked on is the Boulet Brothers' Dragula.
Yes.
And I always call it the drag queen show that could. Because when you see the first season, it is so different than the current season. They're in season 6 right now. It's gone from YouTube to Netflix. Now it's on AMC Plus and Shudder. But you're part of that growth. You did 2 seasons and then Titans.
Yes.
How did you get involved with it? How was that project different creatively for you than any other thing?
Well, I got involved. I had met the Boulay brothers through our mutual friend of ours, Darren Stein, who's the writer and director of the movie Jawbreaker. And Darren
One of my favorite films of all time. Why is that not a Broadway musical?
Well, I do know that Darren's been working on a Jawbreaker musical off and on over the years. So
Thank
if you
God.
are out there, write in to your senators or whoever, make it happen. Courtney Shane on stage.
Yeah.
Darren, I'm shouting this out for you.
Come on, Kamala, make it part of your platform.
But Darren had introduced us, and the Boulets also, were aware of my connection to Peaches Christ, and there was this whole sort of like world of queerness and horror that intersected, and we shared a lot of common interests and certain aesthetics. And when they were in post on season 2, they asked me to go to lunch with them, and they said, look, we opened the show with these kind of vignettes, and we closed the show with these death vignettes, and we are looking for someone to write and direct them for the next season to kind of take it into a different cinematic place. And I was like, that could be me. And the conversation sort of went on for a while because there was a pause between season 2 and season 3. And I sort of thought they forgot about it or had moved on. But then in the 11th hour, I got the phone call, and we kind of left. The spooky train had left the station. And it is in many ways the little show that could, and its huge colossal growth is owed entirely to the fact that those two just work so hard. Anytime I get asked about this show, I always have to say it exists and it succeeds because of the Boulay brothers. They surround themselves with a lot of really wonderful people who are really hard workers, but they had the vision. They sat there on that first season that was a YouTube show in a bar with, one camera and and a dream.
Yes, it was.
And they were like, this can keep getting bigger. This can keep getting spookier. This can get as grand as we envision it. And they made it happen. And when you're on a show like that, you kind of get caught up in the maelstrom of that belief. And I think much like the conversation about dreams, Dragula had this monolithic rise because when they started, they didn't know what they didn't know. They were nightclub promoters who took a chance on making a show. So the things that anybody else would tell you, you can't do that on television, they didn't know not to do that. And because they produced it themselves, they didn't have someone to tell them not to do that. So they did. And they just continue to make wild, unheralded, queer television. And I just, I'm grateful that I got to be part of the ride. I really, I cannot just praise enough their work ethic. They had the vision and they made it happen.
Now, your first meeting with them, I mean, obviously they don't go around looking like that every day. Like, were they like in sweats and a T-shirt? Like, was the first meeting a little kind of, oh, okay.
Well, no. I mean, I knew what they looked like out of drag because
I have no clue what they look
we
like.
had met socially numerous times, and we still get together. The last time I saw them, we had barbecue, which I'm sure they were probably like, don't tell people that. But no.
It's so not that image that I
I
have.
want to see a picture of that.
Yeah.
But I love them. They are in my social life as well, and I think that it is great that they are sort of one of the last mysterious bastions of horror because we know what Elvira looks like out of drag.
Yep.
We know that Joe Bob Briggs is John Bloom. We know kind of the secret identities of all of our queer Justice League. But the Boulay brothers have yet to really kind of be seen out of drag, and I love that.
No, I know that you love the show a lot. What is it about the show that you love so much? I guess it's the performance art, too, is a big part of it.
I have a close connection to the show because back in 2017, after season 1, when I first found out about the show, one of my good friends and coworkers at the time, we were in the morning van on our way to work on a scenic stuff for Universal Studios, and my friend was showing me the show on YouTube, and auditions are open for it. That friend was Victoria Black, who went on to win Titans.
Love Victoria.
So back then, when I was doing performance art, I had a monthly event in Orlando called Escape, and we would have her headline the event once in a while, and that's where she brought out her production stuff to test out and showcase. So I go way back. I was like pretty much Daddy Black like for a while in Orlando. So I've been along for the ride ever since. And I remember when he was showing me, it was like, it's not just like drag queens. It's like you could do it.
Yep.
Talking about me. And I was like, a gay like competition performance show that I could do? That doesn't exist.
Right.
And then I went home. I watched it on YouTube immediately. Fell in love, and then season 2 came out, all rooting for her. And I do want to say, I loved it from the beginning, but the jump from season 2 to 3, bravo,
Yep.
because that jump made it like, that cemented it.
I can't take credit for that. I mean, like I said, there's so many dedicated people who work so hard on that show, and with each season, they look for ways to up the ante. Now, I do remember the first thing that you see in season 3 is that ambulance crash that was the homage to Halloween 4. And I have very, very distinct memories of the night that we went out to shoot that because I wrote and directed that. And we were in the middle of nowhere, and we had, all sorts of vehicle issues. And it was the 4th of July, so there were fireworks going off and messing with sound. And it was just like one of those nights that every filmmaker knows about where it's just like, this is never going to end. Yeah. But then at some point at 4 a.m, when those two in their weird gungy hospital gowns and their like long spooky hair stepped out on the pavement, I was just like, oh, this is going to rock. Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little film hot topics. Reboots and prequels and legacy returns. We've seen new iterations of Exorcist, Beetlejuice, Scream, Child's Play, Rosemary's Baby, Amityville, House of Wax. The list goes on and on and on. Truth speaking, has anything ever come close to the original? Why do we have to rehash so much stuff all the time?
Has any in the history of remakes?
In the last 30 years.
The last 30 years. I don't know. I do, even though I'm a Sam Raimi diehard, I think 2013's Evil Dead is a stunning piece of work. And I will totally own that I didn't think it when I saw it. The night in the theater I saw it because I was so committed to what the Sam Raimi vision of Evil Dead was. I remember walking out of the theater being like, that's not what I wanted. But Fede Alvarez, who made that movie, smartly kind of knew that you don't know what you want, and I'm going to give it to you. And he gave us an unhinged, unrelenting, crazy movie that for the next 10 years I kind of kept thinking about. And that's Evil Dead. Evil Dead is a manic bananas sequence of gore and terror that it says it's like the most unrelenting horror film. I believe that's the tagline on the poster. And it is like he understood that to make a proper Evil Dead movie, you don't need the comedy, you just need the mania. And when I realized that he told us a new story rather than rehashing the old ones and did it right, it made me kind of respect filmmakers who get these IP properties and take the wild swings. I think that this kind of push against remake culture is more people don't want what they grew up with messed with, or they have this fixed sense of nostalgia. But your nostalgia is personal. No one's ever going to be able to recreate your childhood no matter what you think. So if somebody goes out and makes something unique with something that's somewhat familiar, why not? I mean, John Carpenter's The Thing is one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and that's a remake of a Howard Hawks film. David Cronenberg's The Fly is one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and that's a remake of a 1930s horror film. It can be done. You just have to trust the artist, and studios have to trust the artist. That's the big thing. I think too often they lock them into, you have to give us what we've already had, but we already had that. Let this person tell a story.
Why was the Exorcist sequel so boring? Oof. I mean, how do you get Alan Burstyn and Linda Blair, and you have a franchise like The Exorcist? How do you muck that up? What went wrong there?
Well, I think how do you muck it up? I mean, it's the question they've been asking since 1973 when they made the original Exorcist. Almost immediately when Heretic: The Exorcist II came out, a movie I personally love because it takes wild swings, audiences did not respond well to that movie. And every sequel to The Exorcist in some way, shape, or form has been sort of met with derision because it is a tricky premise. Essentially, how many ways can you do an exorcism? You have a possessed kid and you gotta get the devil out of them. If someone like William Friedkin does it exceptionally right the first time, you're forever going to be chasing that. And I think that's the issue, and it goes back to what I was saying about Evil Dead, is so many people keep trying to just go back to what worked about the first one. He already did it, and he did it best. I'm not saying we can't have an Exorcist movie that works, but you got to get out of the house. You got to get out of possessing little girls. I mean, maybe you got to get out of Catholicism. I think that could be the real issue. It's sort of like, how many priests can show up and do an exorcism? What's an exorcism look like in a different culture?
Well, and how scary would that be? Because when you can confine it to the Catholic Church and you don't have anything to do with it, you're like, great, that's not in my wheelhouse, that's not in my environment. The truth is, rites for exorcism exist in every single religion, from Buddhism to Judaism, Catholicism, Egyptian lore. And the Vatican first came up with their exorcism ritual in 1499. Wow. In 1999, they updated it. Why would they feel the need to update it unless something major was going on?
That's true.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum. But it's scarier to think of exorcism. It could affect anybody, regardless of your religious beliefs or, not believing.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good take. What is your take on reboots? Because I know that you love films and you come from a little younger generation than me.
I welcome them because I'm going to see them regardless. I'm excited regardless of what it is. I think very much what was just said. I remember seeing The Last Exorcist, and I was really enjoying it, the first half. And then there's a switch where it turns into what we've already seen, and then maybe just a little too close to like a play-by-play. And that's when it got kind of cringy and just not good. So, I don't know. Why not? But you got to do something original.
Yeah.
So we talk about being original. Tobin Bell just announced that he's coming back to Saw for the next one. I mean, I've lost track of the numbers at this point. I think they've run out of room on the movie poster for Saw XX55, whatever, right?
I think this one's 11, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a franchise, and I haven't seen the last maybe 3.
Right.
But it seems like they have the same kind of formula going. How come it's working for that franchise?
I mean, for as much as I cry out for do something bold and do something new, we also know that audiences are a creature of habit. And there are certain things that are the warm, cozy blanket when they come back, even if that warm, cozy blanket is a spooky old man and his dangerous traps. I think part of what really cemented Saw into the zeitgeist for people is that without fail, for 8 or 9 years, there was a new one every Halloween. So taking it back to your very early question about the connection between Christmas movies and horror movies, one of the reasons that Christmas movies become so kind of ingrained into people's lives is when people like them, they make them part of their annual tradition. So if you see a Christmas movie you like, you watch it every year. I have to watch It's a Wonderful Life. I have to watch Love Actually. And so for some folks, it's Halloween. Halloween means Saw. And a new Saw, whether it fully worked or fully didn't, they showed up because it meant something to them. And for a certain generation, that was Halloween.
And don't you think sometimes we subscribe to films that we don't actually like? Like Home Alone, watching it every Christmas, I don't really like that film. I don't think it's that great. I really don't.
I'm sorry.
I hate kids to begin with.
Home Alone is a Saw movie. That kid, I mean, are you...
He's vicious.
Well, he's vicious and he sets these crazy traps,
he's got to be mentally unstable.
Yeah.
When you were talking about Christmas and horror movies kind of being one and the same, I was going to bring up Home Alone. If you just switch the music and the tone a little bit, It's a full-on horror movie.
I think there's a trailer out there that kind of pictures it. I mean, there's a scary trailer made for everything, like Mary Poppins. I've seen that scary trailer, and I just saw that. I've seen Silence of the Lambs as a romance, and that one did.
Well, Mary Poppins is terrifying. This woman comes out of the
stranger.
sky, and you're just like, I can't be bothered to watch my kids, so here, spooky lady.
And she's kind of a bitch, by the way.
She's not very
friendly.
nice. Yeah.
She's a bitch.
Lord. Okay. On this Christmas or horror movie, or Christmas or, is Nightmare Before Christmas a Halloween or Christmas movie?
What if it's a autumn movie?
Okay. All right.
Maybe it's a transitional movie because the movie ends or begins with the end of Halloween and it builds up to Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a November film. Maybe that's the thing that none of us are saying.
That's the bridge.
Yeah.
say Christmas.
People like to say that November is unexciting. No, not for Jack Skellington.
Not for my waistline, I'll tell you that much. Harry Potter, Christmas or Halloween movie?
What's Harry Potter?
Or are you not a fan?
I'm not a fan of her.
Well, no, but
Yeah. I've never seen the movies, actually. I read the books when they came out.
there's a horror element to them. In
There
fact,
is.
some
Actually,
of them are very scary.
When I was at Halloween Horror Nights recently, to get to a couple of the mazes, you have to walk through the Hogwarts setup they have. And I had this moment when I was done booing J.K. Rowling, and I did. My partner, we can attest that I actually booed as we walked through. The architecture made me think of Hammer horror movies or that Van Helsing movie with Hugh Jackman. And I was like, this would be cool if you could kind of like divest sort of the wizard stuff and just shoot like a werewolf movie on these streets. So I think, there is an ambiance to it. I liked those books when I read them. I do know that a lot of them have, there are vampires and werewolves and, witches and killing spells. I think it's a little more Halloween than Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I think Christmas.
A lot of people, I just read an article, a lot of people think it's Christmas because it's warm, fuzzy, there's candles.
Yeah.
I mean, Christmas, they all go home. I think there's one movie that really centers around Christmas, but other than that, not really.
So they brush over Halloween. Sorry, they brush over Halloween, but they always they let the Christmas time breathe in some of the movies. So I think that's why.
All right, this one's kind of a deep question. Watching horror films, a lot of them deal with the afterlife. They can deal with spirituality, like with Exorcist, things like that. And, there's a glamour element to that. Has your relationship with horror films affected your relationship spiritually or religion-wise?
Well, I'm not personally a very spiritual person, but I do think that horror films, in many ways, for so many people I know, make us more empathetic to the world around us because especially queer folks, we know what it's like to be treated as the subversive element. We know what it's like to be treated as the monster. And, when I do these talks at universities or at conventions, there are folks who are like, okay, I get the connection between the otherness and queerness and horror. But I don't always love when that comes up that it's always the monster that's referenced. Some queer folks get upset about that, and I understand that. But horror in general is a genre of otherness. I think that if you look at The Final Girl, which I don't know a gay man who's not obsessed with The Final Girl in some horror franchise, The Final Girl is almost always othered in some way. The example I always use, and people who have listened to Midnight Mass have heard me say this many times, but Laurie Strode in the original Halloween is a great example of this because she is not like the other two girls. They're popular, they're sexual, they're all the things that she really yearns to be but can't. But then when that night comes, it's the thing that makes her different that helps her survive. And when you look at Sydney in Scream, she is dealing with trauma. She is made fun of for being who she is or being the daughter of who she is. And they all in some way represent something that makes them the outsider, but also makes them the survivor. So I always say to queer folks, if you don't want to identify with the Frankenstein monster and you don't want to identify with the creature from the Black Lagoon, and I do, but I get that, you are Nancy from A Nightmare on Elm Street. You are Laurie Strode. You are Sidney Prescott because you also have to be a survivor. And I think that...
I love that. I've never heard that kind of
for me,
comparison.
That's one of the things that's empowering about this genre, and it has less to do with maybe a connection to religion, but it does have to do with an awareness of the world around us. And because when you feel like you have to be aware for your safety and you have to be vigilant to survive, you're also sensitive to other people who do as well.
Do you believe in the paranormal? Do you believe in ghosts and things like that?
I want to. I always say that I'm more of a Scully than a Mulder, with the exception that I want that all to be true. I think Scully's thing was always, it can't be true, and I disagree. I just think you exhaust all the logical explanations first. And when they're exhausted and there's no choice but to say that's a ghost, then I want it to be a ghost.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna straight up like walk into it. It's colder in this room. Clearly we're haunted. Or
as the air conditioning vent is hitting you in the head. Yeah. Have you ever had any kind of experience that you couldn't explain?
Have I ever had any? I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sure I have encountered weird things. Were they supernatural? I don't know. I can't say.
Right. Has your connection with horror films changed the way you look at spirituality, religion, the paranormal?
I think either path was kind of separate and concrete, so I think I came to it already kind of figuring I was an atheist, and then even getting sober, I went to meetings with the Satanic Temple. So
people have such a misunderstanding with the Satanic Temple.
They really do.
Yeah.
So I was already pretty strongly like in that lane, but I think similarly the empathy aspect to horror movies is what I gravitate towards, and grief and just heavier subjects in general is why I gravitate towards horror. And so I don't know if it's shaped anything, but it's brought a sense of comfort and empathy.
You bring up another theme, which is grief. Obviously, horror films are centered around death. Some of them are campy death. Some of them are inconsequential death, or not inconsequential, but and then there's movies like Hereditary that are all about this power of grief and how scary grief actually is. Those movies freak me out the most. Like things like Rosemary's Baby, where it's really in your head and it deals with your emotion and your mental health. That's the freakiest thing.
Well, and they're really prevalent right now. I think that if you look per decade at what's popular in horror, you can kind of see culturally where we're at. And right now we're dealing a lot with trauma response in our horror movies and generational trauma. And I think it's because we culturally have just experienced a lot of generational trauma and a lot of trauma-laden issues and are still responding to and living through a lot of things. That is not to say that trauma has not existed in horror all along, because of course it would, but how we address those issues. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis got memed and kind of made fun of unjustly on the last press tour for Halloween because she kept talking about the trauma. But when you look at the original Halloween, they're not really thinking about trauma, but they did just construct a whole new trilogy about a woman who had to live with that for 40 years. And that's very specific to the world we're living in right now, because I'm here to tell you that 20 years ago, the idea of like, what if we explored how much this would fuck somebody up? The studio would be like, what?
And the relationship to their family. Like, you're so right. Like, that was very much explored. And I think we're going to continue to see that, especially after COVID. A lot of us had trauma during COVID. Feelings of isolation. We have deaths in our family from COVID, and I think that that's all valid. But to your point, I think, and that's why I still think there's the need for the campy, gory classics just to keep it balanced out. We don't need so much of one thing. And there are smart films out that way that do that well. So if everybody starts to try to do that, it's just not going to come across well. Michael, with your career going in so many different directions, screenwriting, podcasting, directing, producing, how do you know what to say yes to, and how do you know what direction to go into next?
I don't know. Peaches and I were just talking about this the other day, that we really laugh that one of the big pieces of lingo of the generation that's younger than us, everyone's like, it's a vibe. And we're not fully tapped into what that means all the time. But I think that when I pick a project, It's a vibe.
It's a vibe.
Like, no, it's true. I think sometimes when things come my way, I'm just like, yeah, that makes sense for the here and now. Obviously, I am a working writer, producer, director as well, and sometimes it's just like, does this financially and viably make sense with the time constraints too? I'm not going to pretend like it's all, altruistic art.
Right.
But the ones that really, stay the course and speak to my heart, they're the ones that, if someone asks me about it or brings it up, I can't shake it.
What's a personal moment from your career that has been a big success to you because you overcame a challenge? Not because it was critically successful, not because it made money, not because it was a new credit for you, but something that personally and professionally challenged you that you were able to get through.
Well, with my production partner, Brandon Kirby, I founded a label called June Gloom Productions. And June Gloom Productions was created with the intent of making queer horror and queer social commentary movies. And when we founded the company, it was because we weren't really seeing the kind of movies we as queer artists wanted to see. And not only was it a means for us to produce our own work, we've helped other people make some films as well. But outside of producing a film in the UK called The Latent Image, which was the first feature film that we produced as a company, we hadn't done anything in-house that I had written. And that was a feature length. And we did this movie called There's a Zombie Outside, which I wrote and directed. And we did it entirely independently. And so to me, that was a big moment because it is the thing that you don't ever think that you can do. And it's the thing that the industry tells you can't do. You can't make a movie on your own. Well, we stayed the course. We made many short films. We produced short films for other people. We produced miniseries, and we did this, and we worked on this, and we produced a feature that we believed in for another filmmaker, and it gave us the awareness that we could do it, and we did. And now, taking on the next one seems less scary, even if the project is scary, because we climbed that mountain, and we're still here. And that, to me, is worth way more than if the movie ever, wins an Oscar or, is available in every blockbuster across America. There's a dated reference for you.
That is such a dated reference. I was like, girl.
I'm excited for whatever's next because I love The Latent Image.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm so glad you saw that. I love that movie. Alex Burrell, who wrote and directed that movie and created the story with the lead actor, Josh Tonks, they met up with me when they came to the U.S. and when they've made the short film, and they just kind of stayed the course. And they're like, when we make this feature film, we want you to be involved. And we tried to make it twice before it actually got made because of the pandemic. We were going to shoot it in Canada in May of 2020. Guess what didn't happen?
Surprise.
But I love that movie. I'm really proud of the film and the success that they had with that. And it's a sexy movie, too. I think I'm allowed to say that. So.
What are you watching like on a regular night at home? You have no assignments, nothing. You're just. Let's just turn this on.
So I do watch a lot of horror movies. I really watch, especially this time of year, older horror movies. I'm finding that there are so many films from the 30s and 40s that I haven't seen, and they may not be new, but they're new to me, and that's exciting. And I love all of those guys. I want to see Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff and Christopher Lee. There's a certain flamboyance of fright that we just don't get today because everybody is so committed to making everything so real, and I don't need it to be real. I just need it to be fun. But as far as just kind of fun watches outside of horror, my partner and I this year decided that we were going to watch Riverdale after the rest of the world.
Oh my God. Why that show?
Well, I had a few reasons why I wanted to, but I had also heard that it had a lot of weird kind of veers into genre, and we are in the middle of season 6 right now. And we are aiming to finish it this year, and I have to say it has caused me to clutch my pearls more than once. And then the other thing that we're watching, which is kind of a fun sort of intersection between the worlds of horror and holiday, is I always knew that Hallmark had this witch series called The Good Witch
Oh,
that
yes,
Catherine
of
Bell
course.
is in.
Very popular.
Yeah, but I had never seen. And I knew that they had done like multiple movies and then spun it off into a 7-season show.
Yeah.
And at some point, I just said, you know what? I want to know what Hallmark's version of a witch is, assuming we would watch 1 or 2 of the movies. We watched all 7 movies.
Wow.
We're now in the middle of season 2. I just did LA Comic-Con, and Catherine Disher, who plays one of the main characters on the show, was at the table next to me. And I think that like she was there because she was the voice of Jean Grey on the X-Men comics. X-Men cartoon.
Yeah.
And that's why people were like lining up to have her sign things. But I was just like, listen, Martha Tinsdale, the mayor of Middleton, is my new hero. And so it was just lovely. And, we got to talk about it because she had also been in a vampire show in the 90s called Forever Night. And we, I feel a kindred spirit to her because she does the Hallmark thing and she does the horror thing. So,
yeah. Okay. Are you excited about Practical Magic 2?
Maybe.
They're bringing the original screenwriters coming back, which is
Yeah.
a good sign. The cast.
I love Practical Magic. It's one of my...
Doesn't every gay like it?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite witch movies. It's one of my favorite seasonal movies. Those 2 are... No, those 4. You have to include Diane Wiest and Stockard Channing when you talk about that movie.
Of course. If they don't come back, don't bother making the movie.
No, I think that movie is so special, and I think it's a great moment in time for Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock. So I'll be interested to see what I would love to see them all together again. Yeah.
Are you a fan of Practical Magic? Don't say you haven't seen
I'm
it.
just a baby.
Every gay has seen Practical Magic.
I've seen it once. It's not one of my go-tos. I remember liking it.
It
That's
is a
all I
very
got.
Hallmark version of witchcraft and
Yeah.
things like that. Like, you can't compare that to The Craft.
No, it's true.
Okay. What are your top 3 favorite horror films?
My top 3 favorite horror films, it changes all the time. I really love Night of the Creeps. It is a movie that was made in the 80s about 2 boys who are trying to pledge a fraternity, and they have to steal a cadaver, but the cadaver has alien slugs in it, and when they thaw it out, it creates a zombie outbreak.
I need to watch this.
It's ridiculous, but it's also very shockingly emotional. The movie, it kind of is a throwback to kind of creature features of yore, but like made with that John Hughes coming of age tinge, and you could tell John Hughes was sort of the point of reference when they made it. But I wrote about this movie for a book called My Favorite Horror Movie, and it's the film that I chose for my chapter. There is a relationship that exists between the 2 lead boys, where the boy who is the lead, played by Jason Lively, Blake Lively's brother, he wants to get into this fraternity to get the attention of a girl, and his friend really, like, he's not interested in all that, but he wants to support his friend. And you see this kind of over the course of the movie, he's doing it because he loves this person. Not necessarily in a queer way or a gay way, or although that...
Maybe he doesn't know.
Yeah, that read could be had. But in the 80s, when this movie was made, to have a male relationship that was presented in a way that wasn't Animal House, that wasn't like boys being chauvinists or boys like slapping each other like, look at her boobs, or like this kind of piggy sort of thing where there was genuine caring. And at one point he tells his friend, I love you. You didn't get that with men in movies at that time. And even though I didn't realize when I saw it on USA Up All Night, shout out to Rhonda and Gilbert, wherever they may be, Gilbert. But I think that I needed it before I realized I needed it. There's an Italian movie called Della Morte dell'Amore, released in the U.S. as Cemetery Man, starring Rupert Everett at his most beautiful. He is a cemetery watcher who makes sure that the dead stay dead. It's a beautiful movie, absolutely wild. Oh my God, and my third movie, it's got to be something with witches, right? I love witches. Suspiria, the original, because Dario Argento can do no wrong. Someone's going to disagree with me, and you're allowed. But you're incorrect.
All right, and what's a horror film that needs to be reboot?
Reboot. What's a horror movie that needs to be rebooted? I think that I would love a new entry in My Bloody Valentine. I love that movie. I know that they did the remake in the thousands, the 3D, but I don't know. There's something about Harry Warden, the killer in that movie, with that like minor gear. Who's extra spooky. Valentine's Day, I love holiday horror. I just love the idea of that kind of being the unsung season. And Canada's great. I don't just Canada. They make some of the coolest horror movies, and they don't get enough love.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What are your top 3 horror films?
I hate this question.
I know.
This is a hard
And
question.
because most people say, "What's your top 5?" Well, you can put a lot into 5, but 3 is very limiting.
Today I'm gonna go with Psycho.
Great.
I'm gonna say Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm not on like a slasher trend. It just happens to be in there. And the others.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's my top 3
Okay.
today.
All right.
Could
Now,
be different tomorrow.
yeah. Now, which movie do you think can be reboot?
I think, contrary to popular belief, Nightmare on Elm Street. If it was redone and went in a direction of not trying to replicate Freddy Krueger, but just actually have a sick person behind there, I think it could be. I think it could be good. It could be good.
What if it was about like a copycat who was obsessed with the Nightmare Before Elm Street movie, and it became like a movie within a movie?
Like New Nightmare?
I've never seen.
Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yeah, it's
No.
good. It's good meta horror. I don't know. I think that Robert Englund, of course, is unimpeachable as Freddy. He's so good in that performance. But I don't know that we couldn't have someone new play Freddy. I know Kevin Bacon really wants to play Freddy Krueger. I've always said that I think Amy Sedaris would be a great Freddy Krueger.
Oh my God.
Because she gets the unhinged energy.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. I'm in. Amy, do it.
All right, gentlemen. This has been such a fun chat about everything that we love.
Yes.
Michael, what is your message to your queer horror community?
I believe that the best thing that you can do is be yourself. Except at Halloween, be something fabulous, because the trick and treat is you, baby.
Okay. What are you going to be for Halloween this year?
I never reveal before it's time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. What's your message to the queer horror community?
My message, I would say support not just indie horror, but especially queer indie horror. I know so many people who will say, "Oh, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Go out to see this movie." And I do. But what I'm doing in between all those major releases is I go see every single indie horror movie in theaters and anything released on streaming. And not to compare the two because it's such different budgets, different movies, but everything I love most is usually an indie horror. So I would say look into those films just as much as you would any other.
All right. Oh, I have one real fast question. What the hell was Rose Byrne doing in Krampus?
Getting paid.
Enough?
Hey, you know what?
She gave it her all, though. You have to admit it.
Rose Byrne always shows up. Rose Byrne always understands the assignment.
She always does.
Yeah, she's one of my favorites. And let's be real. If the director of Trick or Treat asked me to be in Krampus, I'm there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Where can people find and follow you?
You can find me at Michael Varrati on X and Instagram. Also, Midnight Mass comes out every other Wednesday at midnight. And as of the time of this airing, the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards are airing on Shudder on Sunday, October 13th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Do the math. And we'll see you there. Spooky, spooky.
And that's huge to be part of Fangoria. I mean, that was a magazine I picked up as a kid.
It's an honor. This is my third year being part of the Chainsaw Awards, my second year directing, my third year writing. It is truly exactly what you said. I remember going to the gas station and seeing the Fangoria on the shelves and being scandalized. Some kids were like, titillated by seeing the Playboy, but I was like, what is this basket case? What's that?
I would get Fangoria and Starlog.
Oh, yeah. Same publisher.
Yep. Sumner, where can people find and follow you?
I'm really only active on Instagram. It's Sumner at Sumner SUMNERAHH.
We need to start a platform like OnlyFangs.
OnlyFangs.
Yeah.
I'm into that.
Yeah, all right.
I'll do one of those.
I'm into that, too. Thank you, gentlemen. It's always a grab bag of fun here every weekend on The Rocks. We never know what we're going to talk about. Big thank you to our engineer and station owner, Tony Sweet. Who's coming up next? Taylor Armstrong from Real Housewives of Orange County and Beverly Hills is coming on. Please like, share, subscribe so we can continue bringing this fabulous programming coming your way for free. Until next time, stay happy, stay spooky, stay healthy, stay sexy, and if you drink, stay tipsy. Woo.
This has been another episode of On the Rocks. Tweet me and slide into my DMs on Twitter and Instagram at On the Rocks On Air. Find everything On the Rocks for free at OnTheRocksRadioshow.com. Subscribe, like, review, and share. Until next week, stay fabulous.